everybody, it must be the second Monday of the month, so it's time for Mall of Mike. Hey, who do you know? All right, lots of stuff going on here, and we're just going to dive right into it because this is a very fancy episode of the Mall of Mike. In case you haven't heard, the long in production and finally on people's doorstep a set of DCC Dying Earth has been. The Kickstarters have been supported. It is now available for you can buy it on the Goodman Games site. It's even up on Drive Through RPG right now. So joining with me are two people who, trust me, if I know from Lankmar, are very very happy at this moment. So joining with me are Mr. Marc Bruner and Mr. Terry Olsen. Gentlemen, welcome to the Wall of Mike.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for
Thanks
having
for
us.
having us.
So let's just get right in. What were your two guys' roles on the long process that was the usual Goodman Games cash grab when we adapt something where we dive right in. It takes us 4 years or so in order to actually produce it. So why don't you guys chime in about your roles on DCC Dying Earth and why you're here tonight?
Yeah, it's been 6 years, I think, actually, since we started this project way back in 2017, I want to say. It's kind of like the beginning origin, and my role was the person who wrangled all the other roles, I guess, as far as the project lead, but supported by a lot of people, and including Terry. So I'll let you introduce yourself, Terry.
Hi, everybody. I'm Terry Olsen. Yeah, Mark was sort of the imperial hetman for this project, but I worked alongside Julian and Bob, who you'll talk to a little bit later today, and writing and designing some of the mechanics, and then trying to come up with fun stuff that adapted the fiction that we all know and love to DCC.
All right. Well, so speaking of adapting and stuff we all know and love, why don't you guys give me the 10,000 foot view of Jack Vance's Dying Earth? For those who are tuning in and have heard the words Dying Earth and are expecting some sort of post-apocalyptic things with ray guns or something like that, which it is not. It is something much different. So why don't you guys give me the summary of what people can expect when they go out and they bring home their copy of DCC Dying Earth?
Yeah, so Jack Vance wrote a series of short stories and novels, or short novellas, set in the far, far future of the Earth, and a timeline that's unspecified, but the point in time when the sun is essentially being extinguished or slowly fading out. And occasionally it'll burp some miasma that causes people to reflect on, well, maybe this time the Earth, the sun will finally blink out of existence, and we can finally have the end of the world. But so it's this languid sort of period of the end of times. That's the setting is, and the Earth is at this point in its history where millions of cities and empires have risen and fallen, and this idea that this ancient history is now sort of part of the past, and the people who are here are just the last remnants of whatever dying civilizations are left. And it's a fun setting just because you have a lot of openness that you can do in terms of campaigns and playing. You can have whatever weird cultures or peoples that you might want to put for your players, because anything can happen because everything already happened, right? It's kind of the end, and people who escaped the Earth are even part of this narrative as well. The ones who left and decided to not come back to the Earth, and you can think in terms of far-flung civilizations of alien creatures if you wanted to. But yeah, it's a very evocative setting. There's just a lot of a fun sort of picaresque storytelling that goes on with the different characters' adventures. And Terry, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing I would add from a gaming standpoint that might set this aside from other DCC experiences you may have had is that this one tends to encourage and even have mechanics for banter and perhaps a little rivalry between the players at the table. It's not exactly PvP, but you can expect some rivalry and some fun that stems from that.
Right. we should bear mentioning that although this does take place in the very, very far future, pretty much almost as far as you can get, this is not a high tech future. This is not this is not science fiction. This is very much in the fantasy vein. So we have magicians and we have spell casting, and this is, so if you're expecting spaceships and robots, you're going to be wildly disappointed. So at least at least on the outward appearance. I mean, they could say that there's analogs in there of far future stuff, but it's very much so in the fantasy vein. So
yeah. And there are some some of the stories do take place in they discover ruins of civilization and weird things, but the majority of it is this sort of like fantasy trope of just it happens to be at the end of the world. The other thing that's really fun in the stories, and we try to take part in the core the settings that we have there, is time travel is this big element, because there's this idea that magicians are so powerful at this point in time they can go back in the past and affect the future in some ways. And so it's kind of fun for the novelness of having that as a thing to work into and write against. So
okay, all right. Well, we have set up here tonight. We have downward facing cam. So everybody who's watching on Twitch is able to see right here on the desk. I have the Dying Earth box set, and we're going to open this up and we're going to kind of unbox it. And as I'm going through it, we'll talk with Marc and Terry, and we'll kind of give an idea of what you people can find inside. So I have cunningly already opened this up. so it is not because we like to pack stuff, and it's not always easy to open up on first case. So, and I've also removed the sheet that has the free drive-through download code. So I want my copy too. All right, so I think not this show, but I think we need to get like Matt Hildebrand to do a show just on the art of DCC Dying Earth, because for
sure.
We'll get into it a little bit, but obviously we're a whole bunch of word monkeys on the show tonight. So we have, starting right off, we have the Player's Librum here, and this is kind of the equivalent to like the the Compendium of Secret Knowledge in Lightbar. This is the player-facing document, from what I understand. This is this talks about obviously says Player's Librum on it. So I will skip over here. So you have a very nice, you've kind of gone into what the Dying Earth sources, which is very handy as any time everybody's doing a literary work, because this is kind of like the checkbox of like, okay, what do I need to read in order to run this correctly? And I see you have done much similar to what I did in like Mark. We bold-faced the important ones.
But a clear note, that was my bold-facing, and the other authors may have various favorites. I took the liberty of speaking for the entire team in that regard. So.
That's the advantage of being the project lead. So
I will point out right off the bat, if you look at the art on the front, we'll probably get into character classes here in a little bit, but there are 3 of the character classes are represented with Doug Kovacs's cover art. There's the witch on the left, which is kind of what I think are the character classes. At least I didn't talk to Doug, but we've got a witch of that thing, which is this sort of wizardly creation that's a flawed creation that we have a player character for, and then the magician, of course, and there's another character class, the Wayfarer, which is not part of the cover art, but I like that image just because it kind of identifies those classes and what's different about them from regular DCC.
Right. And the witch has clearly suffered a lot of dynamic corruption already.
So this is kind of the first. I mean, I don't remember off the hand if there was any in Empire of the East, but this is kind of like the first adaptation where the first adaptation of an existing product where we actually introduce new classes. So why don't you guys give us kind of the lowdown on what exactly is the witch, what exactly is the that thing, and all the rest of that. I mean, to kind of give us the overview for the obviously they sound very evocative. So
yeah, I mean, and it was interesting because at the very start of this project, I had this kind of clear idea in my mind that we were going to introduce new character classes. Not really thinking that it was something we couldn't do. It was just like, this is the opportunity because they're so like clearly defined in the novels, in some regards, especially the Wayfarer and the Magician. So the Magician is kind of it's a different take on the Wizard. It's very much using the Vancian magic system of as described in the Dying Earth novels, where you have to expend a lot of sort of mental energy to memorize a spell, and then it kind of hold it in your mind, and it takes this sort of like willpower to do so. And then once you release the spell, you don't have any memory of it. So very good, throwing back to the original Dungeons and Dragons, with kind of memorization slots and things like that. But the way that we tried to make it a more interesting variant of that is that, using the spell result tables, you essentially learn as a magician a specific result. So if as you're training and you come across magic missile, whatever text you're reading is the sort of the game mechanic is it's written down one way, and you only know how to cast it this way until you start experimenting, right? And then there's ways in the game and that the magician can start experimenting, whether it's by like sort of pulling at the strings of the raw phlogiston itself and trying to like hope for a better result, which could backfire, right? Which is kind of the fun element of playing with magic and DCC. Or you experiment with new spell creation rules, which we also have in some of the later guides, that let you sort of take that thing that you learned and get better at it, or modify it, customize it to your specific taste. And so rogue magic is this concept of the magician, and kind of pervades the other character classes to a certain extent, where you learn a result, you cast that as over and over again, but just one time per day, and then you can try to like fluctuate it a little bit with some playing around with magic. And the magician is also this kind of a very powerful class. They can summon magical creatures as kind of familiars that are more powerful than familiars, called Sandicins, which are quasi demons, quasi imp creatures that can also cast magic of their own. So they tend to be a very powerful class, although the limits of memorization are something they have to prepare for if they're going on like a campaign or an adventure. But yeah, I think it's certainly a fun class to play in the playtest and the games that I've run. And then we have a few more classes. Terry, you wrote up a lot of this for the Kickstarter blurbs, and so I think you had a fun time just recapping for the
Sure.
Kickstarter.
Yeah, I mean, the things that I like about the magician is when people first take a look at it, this thing that Mark was talking about, the rope magic, when you roll to learn a result for a spell, you roll a d16 at first level, and a lot of people in the playtest we get put off by that. Be like, oh no, man, if I had a wizard, I'd roll a d20. But the thing is that die goes up every single level, and you can re-roll to learn a particular result of the spell, and by the time you get to level 6, you're rolling a d30 for that result. So I mean, you could conceivably be casting magic missile at result 24 to 27 every single time, right, which is pretty cool. And I guess the other thing that I really like about the magician, and this is my favorite thing, and Mark alluded it to a little bit, is the force of will. And so the magician can burn a point of personality and then use what we call force of will, and you can use it to damage a foe. You can use it to shatter barriers. You can use it in spell duels. It's got all these different possible applications that are very situationally and cinematically interpretive. So it's kind of like a warrior's mighty deed, but without the deed die. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility to it that makes the magician a lot of fun to play.
I can hear people in the chat already thinking of that. It's like, so is can you still spell burn, or is this or is this kind of gone to the side, because there's slightly different mechanics here?
It's slightly different mechanics. Instead of so magicians can't spell burn, or when it calls for spell burn, you have to burn personality instead, because there's this concept that willpower is what makes a magician sort of effectuate magic, right? And so if you burn personality, you can do things like force of will, things like that. And if there's mandated spell burn, like for some of the DCC spells require you to spell burn like a point, you burn personality instead. But a magician by itself cannot temper with magic using spell burn. It's not something that they're so like constrained by like learning magic by rote that they just can't get outside those bounds unless they try to like there's this neat rule, or this neat kind of rule set that Terry helped create, which is this amplification magic, which I was talking about a little bit earlier with you, where you can try to play around with the raw magic, and you basically roll a pair of dice, and based on what you roll, you either add a bonus to your rope magic spell check result, or you subtract it, right? So there's kind of this, you can play with fire if you want to, but you may get a better result, but you also may subtract from what and it kind of comes out even with a misfire, right? So yeah, spell burn is not something that magicians do. We want to make it distinct from the wizard class in that way.
Right. And
But
you want
even those amplification die, you know, at level 1 they start at a D3, but by the time you get to level 10, it's a D16. So things can get can get very, very
Very swingy, yeah.
swinging.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we were trying to avoid was, you know, when you think of, you know, original magic user class, you know, things like that, people felt much like, well, once you're out of spells, what do you do, right? You know, and it's kind of like this, I'm stuck with just repeatedly casting the same thing over and over again. We wanted to give some options to the players and make it more, and it's also more true to the books, you know, honestly,
right.
because
And that's ultimately what you want to do. You want to have
exactly.
something that feels like, you know, a Jack Vance story rather than just like core DCC. So
Yeah.
you know.
And I think the Magician is just a great example of like something that we could perfectly lift from the Vance, and that it is unique and distinct from the rest of the DCC classes that are out there. And the Wayfarer is also like another take on a thief in a sense, right? Because, you know, Kugel is one of these kind of inspirations that Gary Gygax used when coming up with the rogue or the thief class. But we tried to make it and really lean on the social aspect. So the Wayfarer is this, you know, it's a Kugel-like character or you know, class that you know, has some thief abilities, but it's really more of like a raconteur or more of like a social, you know, type player. And it's also one of these things that we have a really fun mechanic, I think, although it can get, you know, very, like Terry said, a little bit PvP in some way, of luck mechanic. That's a really cool, I think, unique take on kind of a swinginess of luck. So the Wayfarer is this class that has a D die, but has a rhetorical D die. So it's in social situations, they get to, if they choose, roll an augmented check, right? Where they can, and they level up, they get higher D dies to access. They can only use it in social situations, and they can add to like personality checks or things that might, you know, be persuading like a guard to let them buy and, you know, get to the vault or something like that. However, if they fumble that, then it misfires and it goes completely awry. You know, like, you know, sometimes Kugel will go into these, you know, kind of like, you know, lofty places, and then it all backfires on him, right?
More often than not, it feels like.
Yeah. But the luck mechanic that's kind of a fun thing is this idea that the Wayfarer's luck is kind of grows the more they spend it. So, you know, instead of a thief die where you get a luck die at every level that increases, basically starting at level 1, if a Wayfarer spends any amount of points of luck, they roll a die corresponding to that. So if they spend 5 points of luck, they roll 5d5 to see how much luck was actually produced by that spending 5 points of luck. If they spend 2 points of luck, it's 2d2, right? So it's kind of this, you know, the more they spend in one big burst, it's tempting to do that, right? But of course, they're you know drained of their luck at that point. They also have this ability, instead of being able to you know, give luck like a halfling or things like that, they essentially are maybe an anti-luck battery in some ways. People can steal luck from them, but at some point it tips the scales, and the Wayfarer gets all the, you know, accumulated luck that's been stolen back in like one big, you know, whiplash effect that can
let's call it appropriation. Right.
Appropriation, yeah.
Yeah.
Appropriation. All right.
But I've seen that go across the table, you know, where people are like, you know, are like, hey, we got the Wayfarer, we're gonna like start, you know, taking their luck. Because what happens at a table is that when you spend luck as a cohort, you know, the Wayfarer makes a die roll, and unless they roll a certain amount, it's basically based on how much luck the cumulative luck the party spent to that day. The luck that you spend comes from the Wayfarer instead, so you get basically free luck. However, if the Wayfarer at some point rolls under the cumulative luck that's been spent, not only do you lose the luck that you would have, you know, spent, but your roll, basically the luck that you spend doesn't count for whatever roll you're trying to make, and the Wayfarer gets all the accumulated luck back at one big blast, and, you know, go up to his, you know, his maximum luck value. So it's this very swingy sort of like, at some point, you know, there's a risk to spending luck, but it's tempting to do so as well. It kind of, it goes in this, like Terry said, creates a dynamic with the players of, you know, how much do I really, you know, want to get along with these guys, or how much am I trying to be greedy and, you know, take it on myself.
All right. So we also have we have the VAT thing. That's our third class, and that obviously, to the untrained ear, that sounds very much like, you know, a Frankenstein clone, something that, you know, literally came out of VAT. And would people guessing that be right?
More or less. There's some cool things about the VAT thing. One of the things is it's sort of a pattern-based life form. So when you have a VAT thing, you sort of determine a specialization for it, whether it's sort of a a martial vat thing that's strength based, or what we call a paragon that's personality based, or what we call a theologue that's intelligence based. And they have a bonus die that they can use for different abilities based on whatever their pattern is. One thing that we found the vat thing is useful for is they're very good at learning things. I think we call it perspicacious learner or something like that. But they get a D16 roll for any skill they're untrained in. And so so if there's a lock that needs picking, more often than not, it's the vat thing that's going to try to tackle it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, they also have this kind of cool idea that we got from the books as well. Like a vat thing is a wizardly creation, right? Or a magician creates a vat thing. So they, instead of having a patron, they basically have like a, some magician that created them, and it's this creator relationship that they're sort of indebted to that person. And we've had some playtests where, the magician at the table is like, oh, I created you, and you're sort of the, you're under my thrall now, and there's like a lot of banter back and forth that can happen from that, which is a kind of a fun relationship. And they can cast spells like a magician too, in many regards, because they're product of magic, and they can learn. They're taught sometimes, to basically be like an assistant, to the magician. So they have a lesser, abilities, but they can still cast some magic as well.
And what about the witch? Beth, I'm sure there's a lot of people who they think, oh, well, you make up a witch. So
yeah, witch is it's an interesting one, because I think it's the one that we tweaked the most, maybe besides the Wayfarer, but the witch really we tried to tweak the most throughout our playtest, because there's not, like in Vance, there's some allusions to witches. There's the idea of like Sabbaths that happen, and there's some encounters with witches, but they're not like any of the core people that are part of the narrative. But the witch class is really, this intended to be this sort of, they have some deep relationship with some entity, right? And they enter into a pact with that entity, and it could be some demon, or it could be some, god figure or something like that. And basically they get their magic from this pact that they enter into, and over time that pact can have consequences, sort of like a patron type relationship, where at some point, by using this entity's magic, and they do like a deity disapproval type mechanic, but in this case it's a demonic taint that they can get over time, that can lead to corruption, or in some cases actually lead to things that make them more demon-like, which some players might actually want those benefits, right? They might want to have like demon blood coursing through their veins, to make them augment some of the things that they can do. But they're also, they get their magic from these entities, and these entities have what's called sympathetic magic schools, right? So the idea that, if you're dealing with a demon, this demon likes to, cast, the types of magic that are demonic, right? And so over time, the witch can get better at that type of magic by giving up some of the ability to cast, opposed entities, magical schools. And so they can sort of become specialized in whatever their pact entity gives them. They also have this ability to basically take vitality from others and either heal with it, or just take it away from like an opponent and use it as a damage, kind of inflicting that. The other big thing that I really liked, because this is always like part of DCC, is like going back to the back appendix, there's all these curses, right? And so it's like, well, who's ever going to be doing curses? So we tried to build in the witch class as having this kind of curse mechanic as well. So using the idea that, well, maybe not something you might be doing in combat, but over time you get enemies and you want to curse them, and you want to play with those kind of effects. So we wrote up a bunch of new curses, which is part of the second volume. You have it unboxed there.
Yeah, I think we and Bob wrote a bunch of curses. I will say this about the witch: if you are someone who likes to play spellcasters in DCC, but the idea of rope magic sort of puts you off, the witch is perfect for you, because the witch shares the arcane and the divine spell list. They get early access to some of the more powerful spells, and they sort of cast spells in the traditional DCC fashion.
Yeah, right. None of this rote memorization for a witch. They just need to get their pact entity to sign off. So
All right. Well, I know we don't, Mark. I know we only have you for about a half hour, and we're coming about. We don't have much time left. So why don't before we go there, why don't we get into grudge tokens? Because I know because that has been alluded to at the start of the show, and people are going to be like, "Well, what's this PvP thing?" As they glare over, at the table.
Yeah.
One guy who always shows up late and never brings the Cheetos. I mean, so
Yeah, you think of grudge tokens as sort of the inverse of fleeting luck, right? So every time, and this is an optional rule. It's something we put in there because we know some tables are not going to want the mechanic to have, sort of this PvP, more PvP like effect. But essentially, what happens is that if you roll a natural 1 on a check instead of just like kind of cursing your luck and rolling on the fumble table, well, you get a grudge token. That token can be turned in to make another player or the judge re-roll any roll. And so it's this thing like you hold on to this sort of grudge, that at some point you're going to spend it at the right opportune time. And if the judge, is like, aha, here's my, my clawed demon who's going to, swipe at you, and they get a natural 20, it's like, I got this grudge token to like, make you re-roll that. And you may get another 20 again or whatever, but it's more than likely you're going to hopefully benefit from it, right? You could, it's in whatever the new roll is stand. So if it's higher, then, the grudge was ill spent. Grudges, though, are kind of like fleeting luck. If you don't use them, they get taken away. So when that player rolls that natural 20 on, who has grudge token, they have to turn those tokens in so they don't get to use them. It's kind of this, balance of, if I have a lot of like imprecations that came against me, over the course of a play by getting a lot of natural 1s, you can build up a lot of these kind of grudges. And if you don't spend them quick enough, then, too bad, you won't be able to use them. But we found it was kind of like this. It's a nice way, I think, of introducing those tables that want a little bit more of that, interpersonal dynamic, because like I said, you don't have to spend it against the judge. You can spend it against another player. It's like, oh, well, steal my rations. Well, okay, well, the core, key time that you need it. Here you go. So, like I said, optional, but I think a fun mechanic.
A friendly rivalry around the table. So.
Yeah.
And I think if I remember right, you can only spend it on a roll that's successful. So it's not like you can use the grudge token to like, re-roll a miss, right? It has to be a successful roll for you to use the grudge token on it.
I was gonna say, that could come really handy. Like, oh, I only rolled a 3, huh? Well, I hate you, and I want to see you roll better. This is, of course, this is kind of the third volume, the intimate anatomies of several creatures and personages of the 21st Aeon. So
we like our long titles.
Rolls right off the tongue, right? So, but so this is kind of our this is and every judge loves. This is kind of a this is the judge's fun book, basically. This is all the neat stuff. This is kind of our we have the kind of the gazetteer, the kind of description of the world somewhat. But we also have plenty of new, obviously, as it says right on the cover, the internet of several creatures. So several to me was always about 10, and I would say that there are actually more than several in this book. We have quite an assemblage of various creatures to be bothering things.
Yeah, the fun part of this is that in Vance he's very brief in his description sometimes of creatures, and many times it's just a name, right? You don't really even get more than just like, what's a keek? Well, a keek is whatever you want it to be. And so, Julian came up with, this great sort of like, we tried to encourage each other to come up with backstories and like, let's put a little history behind it, and then, make it evocative and make it different. And so there's a lot of that we just took some one-word phrase or throw off reference that's in the Vance novels and came up with creatures. And there's some creatures that are, very iconic, the Gid or the Diadend or
the Gru, which is
the Gru being like probably the one that's the Zork fans probably want to get to the most.
I bet you the Zork fans had no clue about the Gru. At that point,
right?
I remember playing Zork and back. I didn't know what a Gru was. I just knew there was a chance I was going to get killed by one. That's all. So.
We also have a lot of magical objects in here. Again, these are in the Vancian sense. What we try to do different about the magic artifacts is that there's always a something that could go wrong with them, right? This kind of idea that nothing is going to be a complete 100% guarantee failsafe, right? And that's kind of built into all the magical talismans and artifacts that are in there, is that they can be misused to a certain extent and backfire on you.
As all good magical items can do. And I just we're gonna cut to a break for a second, but I just wanted to get a chance to show off the wonderful Dying Earth map, which it's just the downward cam does not do this justice, but this is an amazing piece of work by Doug Kovacs, bringing all how much of the Dying Earth was actually mapped in the existing stuff. I mean, was there
there were no maps in the it's all, I think everything was either fan created but there were no maps in Vance's original work. So we did a lot to try to get an accurate map. I think there were some struggles with that because some of it's just references, but Doug did an incredible job with what I think representing the kind of key locations and places that are referenced as part of the novels and the journeys. Kugel makes two of these kind of epic journeys from after he's transported by this malapropism of a spell to go to the far north, and he has to trek all across land in one of the novels, and on the other he has to sail across the sea. And in each case we tried to accurately recreate those places on the map. And I was so happy when I saw what Doug's final product was, because I think, like his Langmar map, which has this kind of like depth of richness you can kind of zoom in at a level and kind of see things that are called from the works. It's very much the same for the world map of the Dying Earth, where there's references throughout the map, and it's all tied to someplace in the novels, even if there's not a known location. We try to make it accurate when it says, like, okay, to the north is like the Museum of Man, and the things like that, and we try to make it all fit within one puzzle piece.
Right. Not easy. So, all right. Well, any last words before I let you two go about the Dying Earth, other than go out there and buy it now?
It's seeing this final product is, after all the work on it, and after getting all the excitement from the Kickstarter, it's just magical. It's really an incredible labor of love from the writing team, the artists, the production team, and getting the Kickstarter comments of people who are excited about the product. It's really gratifying. Just in terms of like being able to contribute to some of that. So I really hope people enjoy it, and I'm glad that people are already giving some positive feedback. So yeah, and thanks to all the team that worked on it as well.
All right. Well, guys, thank you very much for coming on and talking, giving us the as much as we could talk about Dying Earth in about 30 minutes. So obviously we could do this for another hour, but
we could have spent all that time on the magician.
Only half of the initial wave of stuff. So we've got to bring in some more people to talk about other stuff. So so thank you very much, everybody out there in TV land. Hold on one second. We're going to do some shenanigans behind the scenes, and we're going to bring out 2 new guests and a whole bunch of more products. So stick around.
Bye.
Hey everybody, welcome back for the part 2, where we'll be diving into the initial flood of, that's the only word to describe it, flood of DCC Dying Earth modules. And with me are 2 of the writers, and who also contributed to the box set, but as we were talking, I can only get 2 talking heads at a time. So joining me for the second half is Julian Bernick and Bob Brinkman. Guys, welcome to the show, and let's start talking about adventures. All right? Yay! So we'll just go through this in the order. So that brings us the very first DCC Dying Earth number 0, and this is Pilgrims of the Black Obelisk. So and this is written by Julian Bernick and Marc Bruner, and says Marc is not here. Julian, you get all the glory on this. So traditionally level number 0 modules are 0 level funnels. So that looks like the case for this one, right?
Yeah, it is a funnel, and way back in our earliest discussions, when I was rereading Kugel's stuff for about the 15th time, which, by the way, is awesome. Maybe I made it sound tiresome, but it's kind of wonderful. Every time you reread it, you find something new. But anyway, I was reading the pilgrimage part where Kugel connects with the pilgrims, and it ends up being sort of an extended satire of organized religion, and as well as a lot of sort of PvP-ish shenanigans when they get to the end of their journey. But it popped for me like, hey, maybe we could have level 0. Maybe we could start with a pilgrimage, because they were all sort of level 0 folks. And that would be a kind of a different novel way that is represented in the fiction, that we could get a bunch of zeros together and strike them out across the Dying Earth to seek a goal. So there's actually multiple paths they can take to get to the sort of climactic, end of their pilgrimage. And
what's the elevator pitch for Pilgrims of the Black Obelisk? They're pilgrims on a pilgrimage to the Black Obelisk. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. They're gonna find their their religious icon at the end of their pilgrimage. They're going to have some adventures on the way in a Vancian and picaresque way. There's 3 different paths you can take. So if you run it, it will reward play different, with different paths each time. So you could probably run it 3 times and have very different adventures along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and then it has some interesting tests and puzzles when you get to the end and face off with your religious leader, and we'll just call it that.
Right. And patented Doug Kovac's monsters with more monsters on their knees, So
right.
So all right, and so this is everything you need to get started kicking off your Dying Earth campaign. And unlike, say, Portals, as you said, you can run this multiple different times, and depending on which way the party decides to go, you can get 3 adventures for the cost of 1. So there you go. And it looks like we even got a new patron.
Yeah, I think there's like a mini patron. I don't remember. I think it's at least an invoke patron is there. Omvos, the bold demon god.
All right. So there's a demon. So if you're lucky, you might come out of it a first level somebody with a patron. So all right. So that is Pilgrims of the Black Obelisk, which takes us next to another one that you did. So Bob, hold on, I'll get to you in a second. All right.
I wrote them all, and Bob's just here to look pretty, actually.
Hey,
I was clean shaven when I started waiting.
No stolen glory on my show. That's it. All right.
This one is did I ever mention to anybody
the laughing idol of Larshan, and this is our first level adventure. This is DCC Dying Earth number 1. What's the deal here with the laughing idol of Larshan? With a great Errol Otis cover.
Yeah, did I ever mention that I have an adventure with an Errol Otis cover? OMG. Okay. Okay. Breathe. So, this is starts off in a sort of Vancian fashion where the party is hired to go and acquire a bottle of brandy. And they're sent out to a remote area of the world, and of course they find a Vancian village full of odd customs and untrustworthy characters. And from there, they have to find this brandy, but it's in a fortress run by some surly monk type people. And they've got to get into this fortress and down inside it and find all kinds of sorcerous weirdness. And let's just say at the end, what they decide to do together with the treasure is, you can run it cooperatively, or it could have a more Vancian ending, let's just say, depending on how many grudge tokens have been accumulated and where the Wayfarer's luck stealing is at a given time. And I think it's true of all these adventures. You can run, I think parties can run them in a very traditional collaborative way, but if they want to bring a Vancian feel to it, I tried to at least make mine the opportunity for that skullduggery if people want to bring it.
And I one thing I do enjoy about what all the hard work that you have done with all of the Vancians, with all of the Dying Earth stuff, is that you included such things, the Handle Vancian glossary, because you guys did not, you weren't cheap on using Vancian languages throughout the adventures and such. So that is very much appreciated, and I'm sure we're going to be getting to Vancian language in just a moment, because I'm going to bring somebody else on because we're going to dive into DCC Dying Earth number 2. Oh, this is Terry. This is Terry's The Sorcerer Tower of the Sanguine Slant. Unfortunately, Terry is in the green room, but he can't talk about this. But
Mike, I can talk about the Sanguine Slant a little bit because
you've talked enough. It's time to get Bob on their show.
Okay.
Magnificent machinations at the Grand Exposition of Marvel.
There's enough time. We'll go back to there, right? So we're going to dive into the magnificent machinations of the Grand Exposition of Marvels. This is DCC number 3, written by Bob Brinkman. Bob.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. I know that the title of my adventure takes about as long to read as it did Julian to do the first 2 adventures. So this is fair.
So then summarize what the magnificent machinations of the Grand
Magnific. It is the magnific machinations of the Grand Exposition of Marvels. I had to fight for of Marvels because we do like our long titles for Dying Earth. It's essentially an adventure in 2 parts. The PCs are first looking for an item has been stolen and they are trying to recover it. And so first they need to find who stole it and where it is gone. And once they have done that, we go to the second part of the adventure, which is, you could call it a heist, but really it has never gone so smoothly to ever be called anything as calm and collected as a heist, and that is in a magician's manse.
Which of course is
nasty. It's really, really nasty. During one of the play tests, someone called me out and said, "Yeah, so this is what happens when a guy that used to be really big into Call of Cthulhu and horror writes a Dying Earth adventure." There's a spiral staircase in there that gave a few people nightmares. It was awesome.
So since we have you on the show right now, do you want to show off your little treasure?
Oh yes. Well, since we're talking about advancing language, after we went to the Jack Vance home and we saw his old dictionary and his thesaurus.
Hold on, Bob, I wanted to. Are we okay? And that's how you make tuna.
Yeah.
All right. So as we were saying.
Yes. So I actually did. I picked up a copy of the self-same thesaurus that Jack Vance used to keep on my desk. Would have been helpful while I was writing the adventure, but because the language in that gets wow. But yeah. So it is apparently a very dangerous artifact. That
Elena, are we good?
Yeah, we're just going to keep going. That's what we're going to do. But yeah. So the adventure has mystery. It has action. It has doom, and it certainly has almost an action film finish to it.
And apparently a 4-piece band too. So, all right.
And they played on.
So that's the magnificent machinations of the Grand Exposition of Marvels. Which brings us to the Mind Weft of the Moonstone Palace. This is our level 4 adventure. I realize is that I opened up the standard pack, and I don't have the Kickstarter modules on base. So the next 2 modules that I have are the ones which are written by Marc, the Mind Weft of the Moonstone Palace, and the Penumbra of the Polar Ape, which was written by Harley Stroh. And as I said, we can only get 2 talking heads here on the show. I should have checked this before. I thought I had all of them because there are some more available outside of the pack, and those would be the Great Visp Hunt and the Phantoms of Ectoplasmic Cotillion. So since I don't have those here, I would just put this. Julian, why don't you tell me about the Great Visp Hunt, since you were the author of that?
Sure. And I can give you a 10-second on the other 2 later as well.
Okay, all right.
But as you wish. But the Visp Hunt was my try to really have fun with the Vancian village, and really in the style of those Kugel stories, the picaresque wanderings and that kind of stuff, and also featuring kind of the Vancian ending where you actually laugh out loud at the end of the story a little bit. Not that I'm Jack Vance or really quite capable of that, but hey, you gotta try. So anyway, it's a short adventure, definitely playable in like 1 con game type space. But I had a lot of fun with it and had a terrific time detailing out the Visp and we had a page to fill, and Stefan Pogue did a Visp cutaway. There's an anatomical Visp chart in there. So that's one of my favorite things in the whole project. It completely blew my mind when I saw it.
So if you're those who are out there in TV land, everyone know what looks inside a Visp, then Stefan has let us know what that is. So, and do you recall offhand what level the Great Visp Hunt was written for?
The Visp Hunt is for 2nd level.
Okay, all right. And Bob, what about the Phantoms of the Ectoplasmic Cotillion?
So I wanted to do something with the various organizational structures that magicians had. I wanted to sort of play with that a little bit, and what happens when they have created something so powerful that everybody wants it. And so this adventure starts with someone else has already gone ahead trying to get this ring that is said to be able to raise the dead. It can make its wearer immortal. It is an incredibly powerful item in the wrong hands, which is of course for the PCs, anyone's but theirs. And so they are entering the stronghold and lab of this collegium that has long since disappeared, tracing behind these other robbers and finding exactly why these wizards had disappeared. And perhaps, again, second thoughts, mistakes can be made, lessons can be learned. But it really, there's so much that can be done with those various groupings and collegiums and all of those wonderful group names that Vance had for every single one of them, that I thought it would be fun to sort of introduce an entire group and their backstories, and let people play around with that.
And what level is Phantoms?
I want to say it's level 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's those of you who don't write this stuff professionally, it's amazing how easy it is to forget. Like, what level is that again? You know, especially when this is something was written. I don't know how many years ago. You know, like, so,
I don't know, when did the Kickstarter end? Because it was a stretch goal. I know that much.
Right. So, Julian, why don't you give us the quick overview then of the Sorcerer's Tower of Sanguine Slant?
Oh yeah, the Sorcerer's Tower is the party goes off and tries to find and there is a tower of frozen blood. I just love that's appeared out in the plains, and it's of course full of all kinds of Vancian creatures and puzzles and that kind of stuff. As well as I think it's the first appearance of a Sandestin and indenture points and stuff, which is a lot of fun. And there is a Vancian library, but also there's iron stones at the end, and a great Terry Olsenish and Olsenian puzzle room, and the whole 9 yards. So that is a fun one. I want to say that I played it with Tim Deshane as well as ran it in playtest and had a blast.
Well, weird. All right. And let's see. What do you recall anything about Mind Weft of the Moonstone Palace?
The Mind Weft, I ran one playtest a million years ago.
That was like the first playtest module.
Yeah.
I ran it for Brinkman. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, you might remember it better than me, but I remember that there's a time travel element. There is a stone. Wow. It's what I really remember is there's a time travel element. You have to journey in, and I remember thinking Marc outdid himself with some terrific magician skullduggery, kind of Rialto-ish intrigue in the tower. And as I recall, the tower is sort of displaced through time. Something like the palace, rather, right? It's not a tower.
Right.
It's the Moonstone Palace is displaced through time. We had a blast. I ran that for, I think, Jim Scatch and the Wolves and Dave Hoskins and people like that at Gary Con like a billion years ago. It was one of the best tables of players I'd had.
All right. And I know the number of the polar ape. I remember this one because we went back through a lot of this when we were actually putting this one together. This is Harley adventure, so it's not easy, but I mean it's not simple, as I say. Basically, from what I recall, there was something approaching the Dying Earth, and the from kind of the vast aspects of space, and the players get involved in trying to figure out what exactly it is, and more importantly, how to stop it. And I know it's like a hex crawl, except it is a dodecahedron hex crawl. It's basically there is a fold out map that the players get to try to map basically a 20-sided die that which is approaching the Dying Earth. So it's Harley, so it's not a simple chore is what it can be. This is a hex crawl in a 3-dimensional space. So and of course with a great cover by Earl Otis. So I have a very short amount of stuff to come up with. So since the two of you guys were also involved kind of in the writing of the and the kind of developing of the Dying Earth, is there anything you two, because as we say, Bob, you had a lot to do with the witch class and stuff, anything that you want to quickly kind of talk about before we run out of time here tonight?
Yes. As opposed to we commonly will put together like lists of names, especially when a setting is kind of strange in the language and names get a little bizarre. It can be helpful. And so rather than just putting together a list of names in the Kickstarter, in the fourth book of the Kickstarter special, we also have a entire Vancian name generator. I spent the time going through all of the books and all of the names and breaking them all down so you can randomly generate your own Vancian character names. And there's titles, there's all sorts of fun stuff there.
So this the one thing I do, well, that's not the one thing. One of the things that I do enjoy about this is the Dying Earth is not always the easiest thing to dive into, especially if you're not used to the Vancian language.
If you're not Julian Bernick.
Right.
But speaks Bernickian and Vancian fluently.
The whole Dying Earth team has made a product which is, I mean, obviously it's kind of like Mars. We do expect you to have some sort of familiarity with it, and it's actually probably an easier time getting some of the Dying Earth stories now than it was to get the Lightbar stories at the time that it was put out. But once you kind of have like a little bit of a hold on to this, the box set helps introduce you farther into it, and then stuff like the random name generator stuff does a far way of kind of establishing the genre, establishing the kind of environment that you're going to be playing.
Yeah, giving it that feel.
Right, and that's the most important part. So here's a question we didn't cover, but when we did Lightbar, it was done, you could run it either the kind of the standard way, or you could run it with, like you could run what we call the literary campaign, or just the core DCC stuff. Can you play a warrior? Can you play a halfling? Can you play a thief in Dying Earth if you were so involved? Or
DCC, you can do whatever you want at your table. I mean, that's the whole point, isn't it? Right, Julian?
Yeah, correct. There are specific rules for playing just warriors, thieves, and wizards, with slight modifications, and even clerics. So you can certainly bring those 4 kind of core human classes in, and you can even advance them up a little bit per the book. But of course, you could take them and pretty much run them directly as is for DCC. Now there might be one part of one adventure that requires force of will or something like that. So you might have to slightly improv, but most DCC judges are up to it. Read your adventure first and have a plan.
and not only that, right? I mean, there's plenty of stuff in the box. If you really, really like the VAT thing and you're not really feeling running a Dying Earth campaign at the moment, they can step through Gobble's cave essentially and end up in any DCC setting you want, right? I mean, that's sort of the beauty of it. I mean, I think there's stuff like the being able to modify spells and do spell research and having that codified in the rules. I think everybody with a wizard in DCC is gonna want those rules at their table no matter what. Yeah. There's things in here much like the Lankmar Fleeting Luck that I think are going to end up becoming part of every DCC table.
That's the fun of one of these new sets. We always see what kind of people pick and choose and cherry pick out of it, and what flows into core DCC and what flows back and whatever. Always a fun time. So, guys, thank you very much for coming on the show and giving these people an overview on the adventures. We got a lot of good stuff out there. Oh, we didn't even get a chance to talk about the house on the island, which is
Errol Otis. That's all that really needs to be said. It is such an awesome adventure.
So, but yeah, so Arrow was kind enough to write an adventure first too, and because we're doing the cover. But we'll save that for another show. Perhaps the art show, which I'm thinking that somebody outside, not me, should do. So guys, thank you very much. But before we call a night, we will wrap up. I'll give you all of you who are out there watching, basically what you have to look forward to this month, coming down the pike for which I keep saying, which is Chris Doyle is gonna sue me for copyright infringement. But coming up this month, the month of April, new stuff in the Goodman Game Shop. We are going to have a special 7 dice sets. So these are just the 7 funky dice are going to be available for sale independently. This are for so if you have friends who are interested in playing DCC, but they're not ready for the whole 14 dice yet. They just want the 7 dice. They are going to be able to get these, through the Goodman Game Store, and we're looking forward to be carrying these in convention booths in the future. So so if you have people who they play DCC for the first time and they want to know a little bit more, we can put them to the booth and we get a set of 7 special dice for they have there. And for those of you who are still new enough and can't recognize all the dice, we are having laser engraved DCC and MCC wooden trays. In fact, we debuted those at HoosierCon, I think, just this past weekend. I think they were out there for the first time. I might be wrong, but
Dieter had pictures.
Yeah, they got laser engraved trays, which have all the, every slot for all your dice. You can just put down in front of it. You can know, okay, this is what my D14 is. This is what my D20 is. Especially for newcomers. And they're going to, I believe they have the DCC Demon Skull and I think like the MCC Mutant Skull on those. We've got new third-party releases coming out this month. We have Unnatural Selections, which may not sound like it, but that's basically, it's an MCC DCC book. It's a monster and mutants book. So if you're looking for new stuff to add to your campaign, and we just got done with a Kickstarter for 500 plus monsters, but we still need more monsters. So if this is perfect for those of you who are looking to flesh out your MCC campaign, or if you just want to introduce stuff into your DCC game, which is weird. We also have Tribes of the North, which is Germanic Barbarians for the, I'm going to say Pax Lexqua, but it's been a long time since college Latin. But this is the kind of our this is the believes it starts in Rome and has traveled all over kind of Western Europe during that era, and also is Scientia Arcana, which for those of you, if you don't have enough spellcasting stuff with DCC Dying Earth, this introduces new magic rules for DCC, including new spellcaster classes, spells, and other related information. So these are all third-party things. They will be available for sale this month. So those of you who did, speaking of monsters, those of you who did back the Dungeon Denizens, if you back for $30 or more, you can submit a monster if you were so inclined, and the deadline for that is April 16th. So that is coming up. So if you want to get a monster in, you have until about Sunday night at midnight. So start scribbling now and get ready to submit it. For those of you who are looking for something to do in just a couple of weekends, May 6th is War of the Cyclops Con. That is that we're going to kick us off some fun times that weekend. We will be running online our ongoing Cyclops convention. Who knows what people have on tap for it. There will usually be the gaming social hour late in the evening. I'll be running some of my classics. I'll be running Tower Out of Time and Frozen in Time, and there's lots of great stuff out there. It's currently for registration, so get on that. This is a perfect time if you're just getting into DCC. There's a lot of friendly kind of new player adventure pass being run, so time to check that out. And I think that basically it's getting kind of a slow month. Obviously, there's been a lot going on between Dungeon Denizens and getting this out the door and everything. So that's it. So I will be back next month. Actually, since we're 2 weeks in, I'll be back sooner than you know it. So until then, Bob and Julian, thank you very much for being on the show. Terry, you're in the green room. Thank you again for being on. Mark, wherever you are, thank you for being on. And everybody else, thank you for tuning in and checking out and knowing everything out. And until we get back to the next time in May, everybody stay awesome.